Welcome back. This is Do Less Fall Behind. If you have been here before, welcome back. If you are new here and this is our first time meeting, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I think this is episode 7, maybe 6, maybe 8, somewhere around that area. It doesn't actually matter. I'm glad that you're here, and today I actually wanted to do a bit of a deep dive on the concept of a digital garden, or a commonplace book as it's actually called if you are just writing things in a notebook. I touched on this last week when I was talking about the ins and outs for 2025 for like nervous system regulation, and one of those was to do with doom scrolling and how to kind of combat doom scrolling and consume media, literature, books, TV shows, Netflix, podcasts, Spotify songs, whatever, to consume the content that we are consuming, but in a more intentional, slowed down, conscious way. And the way that I have found best for me to do that is to think of a garden, basically. And I haven't been doing this digitally, but I know that this concept is designed for people who want to create a digital garden on apps like Notion or Obsidian. I know is a really big one. I've only just kind of had a look at Obsidian today and it looks great. It looks amazing. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it, but anyway. And if you don't want to do anything digitally online, it's basically the same thing like a commonplace book. It's kind of the same thing. As far as I know, but if I'm wrong, let me know and I will absolutely be open to having my mind changed. But what I've been doing basically is keeping a commonplace book but treating it like a garden. Basically, so what it is when we are consuming media, we just kind of slow down and pause and figure out what we're actually taking in and how it relates to us and what it's reminding us of and what it's making us feel. And if there's anything that we actually want to jot down, if there's anything that we want to remember, if there's any passages of meaning or something, a point that we would like to expand on, or a part of our life that we would like to remember, that this thing, this passage, this paragraph, this lyric that we've just heard kind of reminds us of. So I just want to talk a little bit about consumption and the way that we consume these days. If you spend 3 hours a day on a screen, whether that be scrolling social media, on a laptop, watching Netflix, if you spend 3 hours a day on a screen, over the course of your lifetime, that adds up to 10 years. When I heard that, I was like, no fucking way. And yeah, it's true. It is true. And my screen time on my phone is quite low. I don't have like hours and hours on my phone, like absolutely not. But I do have hours and hours of screen time when I take into consideration my laptop and Netflix and YouTube and stuff that I'm watching and consuming. Absolutely. There's like a podcast that I'm listening to. There's definitely hours and hours a day on consuming in front of a screen or listening to something through my headphones. Absolutely, for sure. And to think that that adds up to a decade of our life is kind of eye-opening. It's not all bad though. Like I'm not someone who's like, throw away social media, throw away our phones. It's all bad. It isn't. Like, it absolutely isn't. I have found community online. I have found meaning online for sure. When I was at lowest points in my life, there were people online who I resonated with. For sure. I've built businesses online, and I would say though that I am pretty responsible with my input and with my scrolling for sure. I wouldn't necessarily be a really bad scroller as much, except maybe on TikTok. I would definitely be a TikTok scroller, but when I scroll on TikTok, I actually feel like I learn so much. My algorithm is on TikTok, and I've recently gotten into Substack as well, so I'm reading a lot of articles and I'm reading a lot of feminist literature, and I feel nourished when I consume that type of media. I actually feel nourished. I don't feel like I've wasted my time. I don't feel like it's sucked up my soul. But when I scroll on Instagram, I do feel that. But I also think Instagram is very valuable for like news sources and finding out what's going on in Palestine and finding out what's going on in Sudan and Congo and all of these places where we wouldn't necessarily know what's going on if we didn't have social media, because what we see on like the news is such a small percentage of what's actually happening. So I'm definitely not a social media like doom and gloomer, and I definitely don't think everything to do with social media or everything to do with the internet is awful and that we should delete it all and It's not. It's our relationship to it. How responsible are we with our relationship to these things? How close are we? And what would be the right distance to take a step back? What is the right relationship? What is the right distance? And it's up to us to figure that out. And I have to say that I feel better when I nurture my soul or nourish my soul with content rather than just like scroll looking for the next dopamine hit from social media, which never comes. Like you're always just going to be looking for that dopamine hit and it's never going to come. So anyway, what I've been doing is this concept of gardening and a commonplace book. So this is my new notebook. If you're just listening on Spotify, it's just literally a notebook. And I got this in Tiger for like €2, and I have so many notebooks. My camera is currently standing on all of my notebooks over there in the corner, and just to like lift it up a little bit, but I have so many notebooks. I am such a notebook girl, and I am such a person for jotting things down in my notes app and also in like a physical notebook. I love a physical notebook. Over the years, I've filled 20, 30 notebooks full of ramblings or inspirations or ideas or quotes or things that I just wanted to remember. But the thing that I didn't do in these notebooks, which is different to what I'm doing now in this new Commonplace book or this new paper garden or whatever you want to call it, I have an index here. Not an index, I just have it kind of divided into different sections so that I'm kind of keeping track of what goes where. And this is something that I didn't do in any of my other notebooks. They're kind of all jumbled up together, and when I'm trying to look for something in those notebooks, it's very, very difficult to find it. So when we write down different titles or different chapters or different interests or different topics that we like to consume content about, we can make those like chapters in the book, or they can be sections in the garden. So I read out the chapters in this book last time, but I'll do it again. So my first chapter that I have here is called Relationship to Self. So that doesn't mean my relationship to myself. It just means a person's relationship to their self. So that could be something that reminds me of my relationship to myself, or it could have something to do with identity or something. Anyway, so if I'm consuming content, or if I'm reading an article, or if I'm listening to a podcast and there's something to do with relationship to self, I will put it in that. And what I will do then is, anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. The next chapter is relationships. So this is relationships to other people, like interpersonal relationships. It could be familial, it could be romantic, it could be sibling, a parent-child relationship, anything that I'm consuming that makes me feel a certain way that I would like to remember, or I would like to add onto or expand onto or research more, I will put into that folder of relationship. And then I have forward momentum, which is basically a chapter where I will put things loosely around productivity, even though I'm so not a productivity girl. Like, I'm really not. I'm such a slow mover, and I'm not a fan of grind culture. I'm not a fan of hustle culture, but there are still things that I would like to achieve. I still have dreams that I would like to accomplish. So anything that kind of inspires me, or anything that I think is relevant to my life that I would like to digest and expand on or sit on or read again, I'm going to put it in that chapter of forward momentum. The next chapter is creativity. So that could be anything to do with the work that I'm doing, or anything really. I don't know if I have anything in that chapter. Oh, I have. So the thing, I'll read out. I'll read out. So this is a thought about creativity. I don't have to fully believe in myself to follow through on my plans. I just need to let myself be pulled by my own curiosity and passions, pulled forward along with the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome. So that is something that I spoke about on one of the other podcasts about imposter syndrome. I'm taking the imposter syndrome with me, and I don't have to fully believe in myself in order to like step forward, or to like have some sort of like to put some energy and investment into my dreams or into my plans. I don't have to actually 100% believe in myself. I just have to be pulled forward. Anyway, so that's just an example of something that I wrote down in that chapter. And the next one I have is shadow work. And the next one I have is feminism. And then under that kind of bracket is capitalism, patriarchy. So anything to do with feminist literature, anything to do with capitalism and how it harms women and how it harms people in general, but mostly women. and anything to do with capitalism and how that system fucking sucks and why we should be working against it, but also how we have to exist within it. So these are all topics, and it's all, they're all topics of content that I consume. They're all topics of content that I like to consume and I will continue to consume, and most of the content that I do already currently consume falls under these brackets loosely. And a lot of the times the things that I write down will kind of bleed into each other. So for example, if I'm writing something about creativity, that could also apply to forward momentum. If I'm writing something about my relationship to myself, that could also fall under the shadow work chapter. Does that make sense? So they don't have to be like rigidly stuck in place. They're allowed to kind of grow and overlap like a garden. You can't keep things separated unless you build up really like strong, tall walls, keeping everything separated. Otherwise your garden is going to like overlap and grow into each other, which is what you want. If you're writing a commonplace book or if you're creating a digital garden, things don't have to be completely separated. They get to be existing together in the mess of the garden. And that's good, in my opinion. That's what I like anyway. So when we actually start to slow down and intentionally take in the content that we are consuming, letting ourselves pause when we hear something that kind of sinks in a bit deeper, going back and repeating it, writing it down, and then categorizing it, putting it somewhere, and then really thinking about, how does this relate to me? And how does this make me feel? What is this reminding me of? Does this remind me of something that happened to me or a past experience or an interaction that I had with someone? And is there something that I need to add on to this? Those are kind of the questions that I ask myself when I do write something down. You don't have to stick to those questions or whatever. It's just examples of how I do it. And another reason that this is good, if you're like me and you are a consumer of content, but you just save things into your folder, the folders on Instagram, the saved folders, or the saved folders on TikTok or whatever, but then you never actually go back over anything that you saved, even though it made you feel something, there was a reason why you saved it, it reminded you of something, it felt important at the time, or it felt meaningful, but we never actually go back and dissect it, or we never go back and investigate it any further. We just kind of leave it there in the saved folder. So if you're one of those people, the way that I do that all the time, this is a good practice to actually go back over some of those saved notes or the saved posts or whatever, and try and figure out, does this belong in the garden? What does this make me feel? How does this relate to me? What can I expand on? How can I expand on this point? And where does this belong in the garden? Does this belong in the garden? We actually put it somewhere, and we actually create a space where we can curate all of these little notes or the memes or the images or the reels or the TikToks, whatever, the information into a collection and let it kind of flourish in the garden. And the way that it's done as well with the concept of the garden, when you plant something in the garden, it doesn't immediately become a fully formed solid tree. It starts off as a little sproutling, and it starts off just as an emerging idea, and they get to flourish and evolve over time, which is a great thing. You could just like write something down, and it doesn't have to be, this is what I believe, I know this to be true 100%. It could just be a curiosity about something. This makes me feel this way right now, ? Maybe in a week or two or in a year or two, you could come back over or revisit the same thought, and it could have grown into something much bigger, or it doesn't apply anymore. And that's the beauty of the garden. Some things rot and die and just go into the ground and contribute to the fertile soil of all of the mess of everything. And some things take root and they grow really strong and really tall. So some of those ideas might actually become beliefs that we will embody. So I also like to think of it as collecting field notes or looking for evidence for all of my chosen interests. So all of the things that I've read out to you there, feminism, capitalism, patriarchy, relationship to self, forward momentum, shadow work, all of the things that I am interested in personally. I like to think when I'm consuming content or when I'm listening to a podcast or whatever, I'm listening out to see if those topics come up, and I'm intentionally consuming content and figuring out where does it belong in my garden. So any sort of snippet of a podcast or YouTube video, films, like song lyrics, Netflix, TV shows, articles, or even conversations that you've had with someone in real life or online, art, memes that make you feel something, like any sort of meaningful passage or paragraph that you would like to remember or expand on. They can all go in the garden. They can all be written down in your Commonplace book, and they can all be added to the cozy collection that you are making. And when I was writing in my notebooks in the past, I did try and separate them a little bit. Like some of my notebooks are for like journaling, just traditional journaling. Some of them are for morning pages. Some of them are for like content ideas. I'm just looking at the notebooks now, trying to remember which one is which. One of them is like just like a diary for my schedule. One of them is a notebook with all my somatic notes from all my courses that I've done. I actually have 2 giant somatic notebooks, and there's just kind of like a mishmash of loads of different books, but all of my notes were kind of like jumbled all together. So when I was trying to look for something specific that I knew and I remembered that I had written down, I could never remember which book it was in, and I could never remember even which part of the notebook that it was in. So I would spend so long, and I still do spend so long going through these books trying to extract just one quote or one piece of information that I've been looking for ages. So this is another good way to kind of keep everything categorized and keep everything loosely organized. It doesn't have to be super structured, but just loosely organized. When we think about a traditional blog or a traditional book or novel or trying to create something like even this YouTube video, it's kind of in a chronological order. There's kind of some sort of structure to it, beginning, middle, end, and one point leads into the next. But when you're thinking about creating a digital garden, it's more like a web and like a garden where it's something's over here and something's over here, something's over here, and they intersect in some places and they're separate in other places, but it doesn't have to be chronological and it doesn't have to be in like a consecutive order. It kind of gets to be something over here, a little sprinkle over here, something huge here, something just sprouting over here. The article, A Brief History and Ethos of the Digital Garden, Maggie Appleton describes a garden as a collection of evolving ideas that aren't strictly organized by their publication date. They're inherently exploratory. Notes are linked through contextual associations. They aren't refined or complete. Notes are published as half-finished thoughts that will grow and evolve over time. They're less rigid, less performative, and less than perfect than the personal websites we're used to seeing. Gardens present information in a richly linked landscape that grows slowly over time. Everything is arranged and connected in ways that allow you to explore. You get to actively choose which curiosity trail to follow, rather than defaulting to an algorithm. Gardens are never finished. They're constantly growing, evolving, and changing, just like a real soil, carrot, and cabbage garden. You are freed from the pressure to get everything right immediately. You can test ideas, get feedback, and revise your options like a good internet citizen. It's low friction. Gardening your thoughts becomes a daily ritual that only takes a small amount of effort, but over time, big things grow. So I will link that article below, and that is more about the online kind of digital garden space. But if you wanted to, you can do what I'm just doing, which is just to keep all my notes in a notebook. So what I've been doing over the last couple of weeks since I've been doing this, I have been going over all of the things that I have saved on my TikTok account or on my Instagram, or all of the stuff that I have saved on YouTube that I haven't watched later or whatever, all of like the watch later things. And I've actually been going through that and figuring out, does any of this belong in any of my sections of my garden? Does any of this relate to me in any way? There's a reason why I saved it, of course, because it made me feel something, or I had intended to come back to it, and now I am back at it. I'm here. What is it? What was it in this piece of information or in this reel or TikTok or whatever that I felt the need to save? And is it relevant to me? And is there anything that I can expand? Is there something that I can expand on? Another thing that I've seen people online doing that I don't do, I'm just kind of scribbling in my book, but I have seen a lot of people split their page from, like, say the first 30% of the page. So say like from here, they will just leave that page bit blank, and then on the bigger section, like here, they will write the passage or the quote or whatever it is. And then in the smaller column, they will write their own thoughts and opinions and where they actually sourced that quote or paragraph from. So that's just another little tip if you wanted to do that as well. So basically what this has helped me do is to get really way more intentional about the content that I'm actually consuming and slowing down the rate at which I move on to the next piece of content. If I feel like something is like scratching an itch in some part of my brain, or if I feel like something is sinking down into my bones a little bit deeper, I will pause there. I might watch it again and I might try and figure out, what is this saying to me? What does this mean? How does this relate to me? And is this worth sharing somewhere? Is this relative to people that I know? Is this something I can expand on? Blah, blah, blah. All those questions that I've already told you. But so I know there's lots of people out there who don't have social media at all, and they don't consume any form of social media. They have flip phones, they don't watch TVs. If that's you, then okay, this is probably not relevant to you, but that is not me. And I really like the internet, and I really like being a consumer. I really like hearing people's ideas and seeing what people are up to. I really like getting so much information for free, but I also am completely aware of how we do get stuck in these dopamine cycles of just like next. Also comparing ourselves endlessly to people that we see online. Not a good thing. So I'm not trying to say that social media is perfect and it doesn't have its problems, or that there's no reason to ever be critical of social media. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I think almost everything is up for scrutiny and fair, valid, but just in this slice of the internet, this video or this podcast that I'm putting out, I just wanted to offer an alternative way of consuming media, a way of slowing down our consumption, and a way of actually intentionally consuming media and creating a little garden from the stuff that we're consuming. And I have to say as well that since I've been doing this, I actually feel a lot better about my consumption, and I feel like I'm a detective looking for evidence, looking for clues, or like I'm a scientist and I'm doing research or something. And obviously I'm not, but that's what it feels like. And it actually feels like there's a kind of some sort of purpose behind it, rather than just to be entertained or just to be numbed by other people's lives or other people's information or voices or whatever. It's like, no, I'm actually looking for little clues that I can put in my garden. I'm looking for little hints or little clues or ideas. I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking for reference. I'm looking for something that will go in my garden. So it makes it a little bit fun because I'm on a bit of a treasure hunt over here. So I wanted to just leave it there. That is all the episode is about. I'm not answering any of your questions today, because if I do, this will turn into a 3-hour long podcast. So maybe next week I want to talk actually about the spirituality and conspiracy overlaps, the conspirituality, if you will, because I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of information about that. But just for today anyway, that is all I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know, does this resonate with you at all? And do you think that this is something that you would do? Or do you think that this is something that you would be interested in doing? Let me know. So yeah, anyway, I hope someone found this helpful, and I will see you next week.